Hello there.
So before you watch this video, I just wanted to say a few things. First of all, I filmed it at the beginning of March, almost 3 months ago, so I'm kind of talking as if I'm still in Buenos Aires when it is now May and I am recently home. Second, it's pretty rambly and I could have edited it better, but I just really want to get it up at this point, and I think the message is there, so I hope you enjoy it for what it is. Feel free to leave whatever angry comments you want. Okay.
Hello. It is me. I am Kristen. Oh, it's been a while. Like, I don't remember what to do. I'm in a new place. You've never seen this before. But yeah, I'm in Buenos Aires. The lighting is terrible because the light in my room is terrible. So we're gonna live with it. So, you might be wondering what has been going on since I got to Buenos Aires. Well, not much. I have mostly been staying in this very room and doing a lot of work for classes, which is why today we are going to be talking about city immersion and whether or not I'm doing it. First, what is city immersion? So city immersion is a term that Minerva uses. If you don't know about Minerva, you should really go check out the video I made talking about it, explaining it, whatever, whichever, because it's kind of a weird school. You can also Google it. But so, we live in 7 cities throughout our 4 years, and in each city we are supposed to do city immersion, which sounds like cultural immersion, but they just replaced it with city, which is interesting because it is supposed to be cultural immersion, kind of, but it also has to do with how we are supposed to use the city as a campus. So, Minerva doesn't supply a gym, a library, food, anything. And because of that, we are supposed to interact with the city in order to find those resources for ourselves, which would normally be on a campus. So city immersion kind of captures those two things of getting to know the culture of the place and also using the city as a campus. City immersion. Second thing, I framed this video specifically as a question. Initially, I was tempted to title it, I am a city immersion failure. But then I realized, that's a really negative thing to think about myself, potentially, if I think city immersion is good, which is a whole other question. But I have knowledge that in cognitive behavioral therapy, you are encouraged to take a negative thought and actually weigh the evidence against that thought to see if it is true. You might feel like it's true, you might automatically think it's true, but it might actually be false. So it's worth taking some time to reason and logic through that to decide if you really should believe that thought. So we're going to be weighing some evidence about my city immersion. But I guess before we jump into that, the last thing to discuss is whether I think city immersion is a good thing. I think in the context of Minerva, there's nothing wrong with being immersed in the city, the way that we're encouraged to. There's nothing wrong with finding a gym to go to or going out to libraries or going out to cafes or markets. There's nothing wrong with getting to know the local culture. There's nothing wrong with eating local food, obviously. Now, I think Minerva sometimes puts more emphasis on us needing to use the city as a campus and less emphasis on helping us immerse in the culture, which is a problem that I have with the concept of city immersion here at Minerva. So, what does that look like? Basically, Minerva's like, oh, you need something, that's your problem. You need to feed yourself, your problem. You need to find internship opportunities, your problem. You need to do research, your problem. You need to have somewhere to study, that's your problem. This can be bad when some of those things require money to access, and students on financial aid don't necessarily have the monetary resources to pay to access them in the city. For example, the gym memberships are not usually that cheap, so if you are really tight on budget, you might not have a very good place or way to exercise. You might miss out on opportunities that other students are able to get to. Similar with food, some people might be able to go to a lot of restaurants, try out a lot of different cuisine. Other people might literally cook 90% of their meals during the semester and not have that same experience. So the fact that it's sort of on us is difficult in terms of money. It's also difficult in terms of time. So like I said, I've mostly been staying in this room and doing work because there is so much work that I can just sit here and do it and then like mostly feed myself, kind of sleep, and that's like my life. It's not a lot of time to take advantage of the city fully, which I know is different for everyone. Some people struggle more or less. Some people are a little more ahead in their like personal development. So like I still struggle with cooking. I don't like it. I don't look forward to it. It takes a lot of time for me to figure out what to do and then to actually do it. And some people don't have those kind of like blocks in their everyday, which might make it easier for them to spend time on other things. Just an example. Because it's not just like some people do take the time and some people don't take the time. We're all like struggling for different reasons and struggling with different things. But it is not the same for everyone, is the main thing I'm trying to say. Not everyone has an easy time with using the city as a campus. And then the other side of that was that Minerva doesn't really put enough emphasis on cultural immersion, in my opinion. One of the biggest ways that we see this is that there is no support for learning the local languages, which makes it extremely difficult to immerse in the culture. And it's just like another thing, Minerva, that makes our problem, essentially. We also don't take classes or anything with local students, which is what makes sense for Minerva's academics, but it puts another barrier to really interacting with local people. I've never made local friends in any of the cities, which is a big part of the culture that I'm kind of missing out on. The main way that I do engage with like culture is through civic projects and co-curriculars, and the amount and quality of those varies a lot from semester to semester. So I've gone to one here, and it was just going to a museum, which is something I could have done myself. We did have a guide who added value to what I probably would have experienced or understood of the history by myself, but haven't been feeling it here for like my personal interests and whatnot, which is something other people feel in other locations, or I have felt in other locations. So I feel like I know like the food of Buenos Aires or Argentina somewhat. I know some of the language things. I did study Spanish in high school, so I'm lucky this semester in that I do get to practice a language that I know. But yeah, not much else of the culture that I have figured out or been immersed in. So, you're starting to see how I feel about my ability to do city immersion. Let's jump in to the evaluation. And we're going to do this with reference to my bullet journal because I didn't have time to write a script for this. And this is a nice place where I keep track of everything that I'm doing. So, first, we're going to go through and look for positive evidence that I am immersing in the city. And during this, you will see a few clips of video I've taken on my phone while I've been out in the city because I was like, whoa, this is a cool thing that I'm doing, and I should document that that's happening. So, squeeze that into this. January. Beginning of the semester, one good city immersion thing I did was go walk around San Telmo for an afternoon. I did actually happen to find Plaza Dorrego, which hosts an amazing antique market on Sundays, but we were there on like Thursday, so I didn't see that, but saw a pretty iconic part of the city and figured out public transit and stuff, so that's like 1 point. Next, during like Minerva programming, we have a sort of orientation in every city called Elevation, and one of the days of Elevation is always an exploration day where they kind of take you around, make sure you go to some iconic sites, kind of get excited about the country, and also figure out like public transit and stuff. So during exploration day, I participated. I went to the obelisk, and I also went over to this like very iconic bridge over at like the bay that I can't, not the bay, the port, over at the port that I can't remember the name of, but maybe I'll throw a Google image picture of it here. And then I also made it to Plaza de Mayo and the Casa Rosada, so that's like the presidential house and a very famous square where a lot of like very famous protests have happened. So that's 3 things, but Minerva forced me to go to them, so I'm only going to give myself 1.5 points, except that I have gone back to 2 of those 3 places, so maybe I'll make it 2.5, so like 2 whole ones for the ones that I've gone back to, and a half for the one that I only went to on exploration day. So we are at 3.5. Another thing I have done is gone out to a nearby bar with a bunch of friends, which I think kind of counts as cultural immersion, like getting to know what the nightlife culture is like. So that's 4.5. There was another day I went out with a friend to try and find a place to buy art supplies, and we ended up walking down past near where the obelisk is, but we also found another like pedestrian street that seemed very cool, had a lot of touristy stuff, and so I'm going to count that random find as part of like discovering the city and cultural immersion. So, half point. Let's take it up to 5. I also went out to another part of the city to go to a bar, which is in more of a place where the nightlife is actually concentrated, and there were a lot of other people out, and it was like the weekend, and I'm gonna count that as another point, because that's city as a campus, you know? I went to the Gran Ateneo, which is a old theater that's been made into a bookstore that's very famous on a lot of listicles about like the prettiest bookstores. So that's a point. I went to that co-curricular. So we visited the art museum and had a tour, a little bit customized. So I think we're at 8. I also went to the Recoleta Cemetery after I went to the museum that day. Another day, I spent like a whole afternoon going to that Sunday market in San Telmo, walked all the way from the plaza to Plaza de Mayo and hung out there. And so even though those were places I've been before, I got to experience the market and walk around and see all the goods, which is more of a like cultural activity, I think. And we also hung out in the park, the grass in Plaza de Mayo, had a nice time, so also using it as a campus. Look at me. And so 9, and that's pretty much it. A few more things that might fall into this category that are a little more ongoing and not so much events are there's a group of Minervans that order like organic produce from a vendor in the city and get it delivered every week, and I've ordered from that a few times. I also go to a grocery store nearby. I have a couple cafes I really love nearby, but those are all really close in the neighborhood, not really like getting far out into the city. So like, point for that, living life, city is a campus, I am surviving. But that's pretty much it for the pro category. Now, the evidence is not so easily quantifiable in the con category because we could possibly just count the days when I don't do anything in the city, but the thing is that most days I like go outside to like buy food or get coffee or something at least once, but you can figure that all of the days I have not mentioned are days that I didn't do anything particularly interesting in the city. So let's go to the reasons I think I am a city immersion failure side of things, which is perhaps less quantifiable. 1, most weeks even, I don't leave a 4-block radius of the residence hall. Some days I don't even make it 1 block away, which is between those two things 95% of days. And the main reason I've gone farther away is for medical services, which is just not a positive thing really. Also, I feel like I'm really not getting to the full potential of what I could be doing with improving my Spanish here. I mostly just interact with people when I'm ordering food, which is not particularly thorough, fluent conversation. And even then sometimes I mess up because I just don't know so much what the cultural norms are. When a food worker asks how you are you supposed to say I'm good, how are you? Or are you supposed to just say I'm good and then order? And then I keep panicking and then just ordering and ignoring it and then feeling bad. And sometimes they ask me a question when I'm ordering and I don't understand one of the words and then I look like an idiot and then they just switch to English. So there's also that. But that's a high expectation for a Minervan. A lot of Minervans aren't going to try and do the language at all, which is arguably still evidence against, but maybe just more institutionalized and less personal to me. Another thing is that I do not use the whole city. I've seen so little of the city, and I just don't know how to find good places to go out in the city. Part of that is specific to Buenos Aires in that I'm very afraid to go outside by myself, and a lot of my exploration in other cities has been solo, and I think the cities I've tended to underexplore have been the ones where it's harder to go out by yourself. So here, we've had a couple students get pickpocketed or even mugged, which is pretty terrifying, and therefore I don't want to try and go out and randomly find a cafe to study at because I really want to be safe with my laptop, and that means going out with people and having a destination. And that is just very difficult. And so I've seen so little of the city. And quite often, I sit in this room for 80% of my day. Sometimes I spend enough time in the lobby or at a cafe to break that, but more recently I've been trying to not spend money to go to a cafe every day, so I've been mostly in this room. And I mean, it's hard to weigh that evidence. It's hard to compare because it's I am still a student. I am still taking hard classes, multiple of them. I do need to do work. I can imagine a way I could be doing work and immersing in the city more optimally, but I think that's my perfectionism showing. So I feel like maybe I need to be a little bit more forgiving with myself. I have been, like, for the last 3 weeks, not done anything at all in the city besides go to one of the 3 cafes nearby that I love. So I think we're gonna let's go on an A to F scale, okay? I think on an A to F scale of city immersion, I deserve a C-. Just barely below average. And the fun thing about using an A to F scale is that imagining that it's on a bell curve. This is putting me in reference to other Minervans, slightly more realistic expectations. There are people that are doing way better than me. I think I'm really close to the middle of the pack in terms of how much I go out and do stuff, but maybe slightly below what I would consider average, which might not be true, but that's my assessment based on just my impression of Minervans, which could be very false, but it's also based on my impression of what I think like a good but not impressive amount of city immersion would be for a Minervan. We've kind of reached a conclusion that I'm not a complete failure, but I am surely not a success story. How uplifting. If you want to talk more about this idea of city immersion, I would love to do that in the comments, because I still have so many mixed feelings about it, and what Minerva expects from us versus what is realistic, versus, like, am I just not good enough, which I think is not true, because they let me in and I'm still going here, so reasonably I should be good enough to do well here, one would hope. But yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts. And that's all I have for now. I hope this was an adequate update on how Buenos Aires is going, since I haven't uploaded it all this semester, an actual update video about Buenos Aires. I am going to say, like, with my face and my voice, that I'm taking a class this semester where I make art pieces, and so you're gonna notice a few videos that are maybe a little bit out of the norm for what I would do on this channel, but that's because they're assignments, which is cool. But yeah, I don't really know what the direction of this channel is. Subscribe if you want to know more about
I don't really know what I'm doing.
want to know more about my life at this stupid school. My roommate's laughing at me. Okay, bye.
I just like the pause that you had and like I don't really know what this like it looked like you kind of just like